trying to find out about crossbenchers. Apparently, they're not allowed to have given so many over a certain amount of donations to a political party, or have held a significant position in a political party. So the difference between non-affiliated members and crossbenchers seems a bit strange to me. But anyway, it says here, I was trying to find, the thing is, the Lady Chief Justice, right, I don't know what political party she's a member of, and I wanted to know whether she was Labour or Conservative, and I don't seem to be able to find out. She's not on the list of peers in the House of Lords because, I've just found out this is the reason, it says that the Law Lords the Law Lords had a separate affiliation. So apparently the Law Lords didn't have an affiliation with a political party or crossbench. They had their own affiliation anyway, I suppose. So apparently they had their own affiliation anyway. But their successors, which are now justices of the Supreme Court, if they're peers, and most of them are, that's the point, or else they can't. That's the whole point of, being judged by the House of Lords, but it's been moved to the Supreme Court. So you'd have thought they'd have had to be peers, or, I mean, what about the whole point in Magna Carta? Barons and Lords can be judged by their equals. Maybe they don't need to be judged by the Law Lords. Then maybe they can be judged by their peers if they're just peers. But anyway, this is all to do with Gordon Brown and the Constitutional Reform Act 2005. If peers are disqualified from sitting in the Lords until they no longer hold a judicial position. So, according to this, and I think Dame Sue Carr can't sit in the Lords and vote. I didn't know that. Now, this is clearly to do with the ideology of Gordon Brown, who was a man of numbers and economy and figures and sums and adding up and apparently balancing economies and growth and, selling off all the gold, basically a numbers juggler. But when it comes down to it, people like Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, you'd have thought Tony Blair knew better, but Tony Blair did the congestion charge against Magna Carta, and he was meant to have been a lawyer, but not a very good one, and more in business employment law. I don't think Gordon Brown and Tony Blair knew exactly what they were doing with this country. I think they've made a complete mess of it, and possibly they were misguided, Maybe it wasn't their own ideas, but whenever I look at these things, like Queen Elizabeth repealing those Magna Carta clauses in the Criminal Law Act 1967, when they need them to open Parliament with, all of them, which is like just ridiculously stupid. How can it function properly? We've got these historical figures, more modern, who were breaking the government, and they think they're doing a good job. Oh yeah, I had to do this, I had to balance the economy this way or that way, or whatever. But it actually can't work. It's all the thing with these. The thing with this subject is that it's all in the mind. It's all ideological and on paper, right? It's actually subjective. The law is subjective. The actual making law is subjective, right? And obeying law is purely subjective to the agreements of courts, police officers, Crown prosecution, the recognition of humans and the conscience and judgment of humans. It's a consensual basis, right? The whole law and legislation, although we act on it, humans act on it by their actions. So, like manufacturing passports, because we say we've all got to have them, so they make them, and then they make you buy them, and then they get the photograph taken, and we go through the rigmarole. It's all consensual. Someone says, right, make passports. Someone says, right, you've got to have them, so we all do it. There's a consensual, the machinery for it that animates us into action is purely subjective, right? This is the thing with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and Cameron as well. I think all of them, and it's this: if it was a physical machine part, right, like a cog, if the legislation of England, the law, wasn't ideological or written in paper, if every act of law or legislation was a cog or a wheel or a transistor or a resistor or a capacitor or whatever material thing it was, if working properly, is designed to do, they would have broken the machinery. It would halt, it would stop, it would seize up. The engine wouldn't move forward. The steam. I mean, we've got this now with these electric cars and buses that they're blowing up. They're setting on fire. All these electric vehicles you see exploding and setting on fire. We never had that before. It's almost replaced. Like we had a lot of chip pan fires. We always used to have a lot of fires and chip pan fires, and there always used to be the fire engine going around, to put these fires out when we shouldn't have even really been having deep fried chips or anything like that anyway. We shouldn't have been having deep fried chips or fat fryers or all these horrible foods, even before they implemented McDonald's and KFC and Subway, all through the, Queen period, the, Freddie Mercury, I want to break free, all this, turkey basters and kitchen cookers and, the whole 1980s Christmas dinner themes, all this gross excess, all these fires everywhere were because of people not concentrating, not having the focus, or, the fact that they shouldn't have even really been eating or doing those things, really, to that extent. We had all these fires, the fire brigade, the fire engines, and that kind of went with all the new safety features and, getting rid of certain things, although, people still have chips, but, not in the context of what they had them before, even though now they're saying, they're complaining now about mould. If they complained about mould and houses conditions at the time when they were complaining about, kitchens setting on fire and fire brigade being a lot more active, now it's almost like we've been these electric vehicles exploding and blowing up. It seems like we're designed. It seems like they're putting us in EVs, electric vehicles, and they're all setting on fire and blowing up now. It's going to be replaced chip pan fires, pressure cookers, So anyway, the thing with Gordon Brown and Tony Blair and other prime ministers is that they've actually done things that actually can't work and don't work, but they haven't realised or they don't know. And this is when you have these uprisings or protests or general public backlash or whatever it is, right? Because they recognise that it's wrong. They've done wrong. Whether or not it's, bad effects on the environment or on our health, sperm count dropping 50% through the floor, or whether it's, legal matters, like this Liberty of London. The matter that I'm raising now, this Liberty of London, which is a valid matter. It is a valid matter. And that is this Liberty of London that, according to the law, correctly read and interpreted and understood, whether you care or not. And these people do. They pretend they care because they've got all the costumes, they've got all the uniforms, they wear all the regalia, they've got they command the titles, they turn up in Parliament. Andrew Bridgen was in there, now he's not. George Galloway was in there, now he's not. Now we've got Keir Starmer, and now the new Attorney General says that he's going to, try to uphold the rule of law and sort out the legal mess or whatever. They like it when they're opening Parliament and when they're voting for the Speaker, ayes and nays, and they're dragging the Speaker into the chair, and they're doing the ceremonial opening. They love all that, but they also are making severe errors and mistakes, like revoking all these privileges in Magna Carta. 1967, young Queen Elizabeth, whoever advised her on it, or whether it was the royal's own whether they were motivated behind it to take his rights away, or whether or not these ministers coaxed him into it. We're not sure for certain, but I think that the people have been having less and less power the whole way through, at least particularly from the 1800s. You see, you get the rising people power. You couldn't vote for MPs unless you were a landowner. Classically, only landowners could vote for MPs, although we could vote for as local jurors. But for members of parliament, it was only landowners or people who were wealthy. And now everyone can vote for members of parliament, but we don't vote for our juries in our local area. We don't vote, we don't have jurors in civil cases or in lower courts, magistrates' courts. And that's important, to do with a lot of, and also in council, civil requests, planning applications would have been controlled by the communities and public, right? Not by people just with pure wealth and money. The Labour Party is meant to have been opposition against all the Conservatives, the wealthy landowners, and those with all the money who could afford everything. Until this new mill owner class, Labour created the new wealthy company owners, and then a lot of these Labour Party women really want more and more and more and more, and they gradually become Conservatives and Tories. And they really, really, I think they reject and shun, actually, the working class, ultimately, and they want everyone to be kind of woke, obedient, kind of idealists, like, you can see that with Keir Starmer and probably the majority of the female Labour Party members, at least the ones who are in charge, shunning people like, Jason Williamson and even Jeremy Corbyn and Galloway, really. All these people who want public ownership of everything, and so coming back to the legislation, there's a lot of errors being made. And I think this thing here, you see, I've pulled them out in the Judicial Conduct and Investigation Office itself. I've pulled them out on this law, which basically says that, if you're a judge or a justice, you can't continue as an acting barrister. People can't employ you to work as a barrister, because really, you're working both sides of the bench, aren't you? It defies the word cross. It's like crossbencher. The word crossbencher here. If people can pay you money to bring certain cases and formulate certain cases to get certain things through court, but at the same time you've got a job working in the courts, you're employed by the courts to judge cases in and amongst, depending on which case you're chosen for or assigned to, or even advising or affiliating with other justices and judges behind the scenes. It's unfair if you're a paid barrister working for cases that are brought and also working for the side that are judging cases, right? And this is, you would have thought that ideology, but yet many deputy judges and justices have found out to be practicing barristers or as well. Like that Aidan Eardley. And here, I think that is meant to be the basis, what they've got here, which says that the law lords were a separate affiliation, but their successors, the justices of the Supreme Court, if peers, well, they should be, you'd have thought, are disqualified from sitting in the Lords until they are no longer hold a judicial position. Well, I think that's got to have been surely since the Constitutional Reform Act 2005. But otherwise, I don't know why they took it out of Parliament. I really don't know why they took it out of Parliament, because, you've got this, the whole framework for petitioning is built in there to petition Parliament itself. Go, take it back up to the people who make the laws and put them through. Ultimately, which is meant to be above the justices. Why separate it? And there are many reasons why it doesn't work. There are many, many reasons, and it fails primarily when you start petitioning, because the petitioning is meant to be part of the judicial system, and even hop, skip and jump it from the start if you bring a case straight to Parliament. But the new petitions committee was just dumbed down, So, and then you've got this whole Liberty of London as well, which I just don't think Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, he clearly doesn't value. He wants to be a mayor. He wants to be the Mayor of London, a modern mayor, with a nice little soft cotton shirt on and no tie, apparently. But he clearly is not tied to the ancient liberties of London, that's for sure. I don't know what it is with these people. They want the position, the title, the rank, the power, but they don't seem to believe in or care about the actual laws that even give them power, the charters and the commissions and so forth. It's just ridiculous. And they're severely misled by people like Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. But history's full of these type of things. History's full of conflicts, civil wars. And the only thing we don't have, well, we had the Lord Hanningfield and the expenses scandal, but we don't we don't have people being put in the Tower of London anymore. Although there are some peers who, I think some peers have been prosecuted, but they're meant to have their privileges, or at least to be judged by their equals. And in a lot of cases, they weren't being doing, particularly leading up to that Lord Hanningfield case. There were lots of things, really. But anyway, so I was looking at this non-affiliated members. Most non-party Lords Temporal are crossbencher peers. May also be required to sit as non-affiliated while they hold certain senior positions within the Lords. Well, they've got the Lords, I think they've got the Lords Spiritual or a separate Senior Deputy Speaker. Others have had no party allegiance and choose the designation rather than joining the crossbench. Right, that makes more sense. So others have had no party allegiance and choose this designation rather than joining the crossbench. So that pretty much, I would say that answers my question, that one sentence there. That's pretty much what I was looking for. It just says that others have had no party allegiance. So maybe the crossbenchers are ones who have been affiliated with certain parties but no longer do, whereas non-affiliated have never been affiliated with any parties, or at least not significantly. Although a member who is elected Lord Speaker must withdraw from any party affiliation, he's not considered to be a non-affiliated peer. Well, that's like the Speaker in the Commons, isn't it? Lindsay Hoyle, who is probably more Labour than Labour, you would have thought. But then again, is he more Labour than... Starmer's Labour is not Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, is it? This is the thing. It's a shame, really. The Conservatives have fractioned off into all this reform, the Conservatives and other parties, which is why Labour won. But Labour didn't split up. I think Labour had more people, actually, MPs stand down. Labour had an extremely large number of people stand down, and I think they had lots of people leave the party as well. But what they didn't do is start another party. That's the thing. I think Corbyn was thinking about it, but he didn't do it. If it would have officially have split up and fractioned, I think you might have ended up with a hung parliament or some kind of coalitions without any majority. But apparently Labour didn't actually truly, completely and totally wipe the floor anyway, because there was only 59% turnout for voting, and they've only just managed to get in due to the fact of how the electoral areas are set up and how you count the votes. They didn't actually completely totally dominate the political field. They've just won because of how the counting tallies up into overall who wins overall. So anyway, that answers my question about this, when I've actually gone a long way around talking about it. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of things broken at the moment, and they don't have to. The thing with subjective machinery is that you can ignore there's a problem if you don't recognise it or refuse to. With an actual proper machine, physical machine, it actually won't work if it's broken. Unless you tack some tape on it, but at least you're trying to form it back into the position it's meant to be in, hold it in place when it has actually fractioned off and broken, right? Ideologically, as long as people do as you say, you don't need a reason. You can get people to do what you say by whipping them. And this is the thing with whips. That's reminded me of the other thing that I wanted to say. This is another major malfunction and breaking of the political system. And I think this is a broken part that goes back a long, long way, possibly even to the short parliament and long parliament, and that's a long time. And that is the whips, the party whips. Because if you didn't have any political parties when people were just getting elected to represent their constituents, aren't your constituents your whips? Aren't the people really, the public, your whips, really? If you've been elected by the public, aren't the public your whips, right? Because, if you don't perform, like, look at Andrew Bridgen. I thought Andrew Bridgen was brilliant in Parliament, and really he's what we need, an independent voice or a voice speaking out about things that other people won't talk about. But he's been, he's been unelected. He's been, replaced. And that means that the local public didn't invest their power into him, didn't grab him like they grab Lindsay Hoyle, these other MPs, and drag him into Parliament, right? So really, we are meant to have the whip on our elected member, particularly in the surgery. Even if you're a minority, what you can do is you can go and get a petition, even if your electorate area is mainly Labour, and they elected the guy to go represent them. So, it's supposed that, the majority of people usually agree with him on most things, right? When there's a matter that they don't agree with him on, or you can prove that, the local people are getting him to do opposite, then that's when you're going and collecting the signatures, really. And you're compelling him to have, represent in Parliament the opposite opinion on a particular matter, which is really what political parties don't like. Now, this whip tradition in Parliament of these main parties is old, but it's not that old. It's become tradition, but it certainly wouldn't have been that much tradition, I wouldn't have thought, around the time of Oliver Cromwell, because they hadn't really properly... They had these Roundheads and Royalists, didn't they? but that was only because of the Civil War. But before, kind of like leading into that 1640s, the parliaments weren't that often. So you didn't even really have the same people representing you in parliament. They were very much people of one parliament. You had the members of a particular date, and they were setting the record books of being the members called to parliament just then. Like John Pym or whatever. He was meant to be considered one of the greatest parliamentarians, really. So I read John Pym, right? And what I found since they actually formed the parties and started wearing the colours or whatever to certain parties or groups, and then those groups, you see they form a headquarters. And then they are recruiting, more of the elected members to them. But it's strange that you have a headquarters of MPs out of Parliament, but yet, well, you had the Court Party, didn't you? You had the Court Party, which was the cabinet. And then you had the opposition. All those who weren't the cabinet were meant to be the opposition because they're not the ones making the decisions. The cabinet are, so they're opposed to them, right? And then you've got the Privy Council who are sworn in on oath to the King, right, which is kind of an even further oath than the oath of an MP, because for Privy Council, you can't even recognise or see anything that the King's doing wrong, etc., etc. So, if the if the King and the Privy Council or in the House of Lords are doing certain things which might not be legal or good, apparently you're not even supposed to be able to oppose them effectively. You can't have an opposition to the Crown effectively. To sum it up into one sentence, you can't have an opposition to the Crown. Although the subjects can, the people can, because you've got the right to petition the King, which is to oppose him. But apparently he can't do no wrong in the eyes of the Privy Council, although in the eyes of the public he must have done something wrong if they owe them some money or if he's breaking the law or whatever it is that they're not happy about, or else, what is a grievance? You can't have this is a great one from the Petitions Committee. You can petition about wrongdoing, but a grievance means you've been wronged or something's been done wrong, which is absolutely crazy. This is more failure of logic, and why we end up with these very naive and inexperienced MPs in the Petitions Committee who are being advised by staff members, clerks, the Ministry of Justice, Attorney General, God knows who, like Cat Smith MP, who was the chair of the Petitions Committee, but they don't scrutinise or they're not critical of their own purpose and department. They're not self-critical, basically. They're not self-reflecting. And again, it's based on the party whips, a lot of it, and on this subjective pure will, rather than actual, if it was actually working cogs and machinery, and it won't turn, it won't move when it's supposed to. It says, this goes round, but it doesn't go round. Bring your grievances to the Parliament. Oh, we don't do with wrongdoings. The cog won't move, but it says it's meant to. This sort of thing. But so, So yeah, the whips. So the local councillors, this whole thing that if the Labour or Conservative get control of the council or control of a council, because you've got the majority of councillors elected, and apparently they're under a certain party. But now, this is when we get to this employment of local councillors. So this is not MPs, obviously, in the House of Commons. I'm talking about local councils now. But they actually have got this thing that's called the employment policy for councillors. And I've been shown it because Colchester Council Watch channel featured it in one of their programmes, and they showed us the actual printed out excerpt from it, which was that, you know, councillors have to abide by an employment policy of selflessness. They actually write this. They actually do this legally binding in a court of law. If you go into a court of law, this is, you know, they've agreed to a policy apparently, right? If you're selfless, you can't even raise your hand in your own opinion. It has to be only raised on your electors, right? Of yourself, right? But this is the thing. You maybe you might be able to raise your hand on behalf of a political party that you're not the party's other than you, right? You're not the political party, but if you're a member of the party, right, and you know you've stood as a candidate for a party, but the thing is, you're elected into power by your electorate, by the public in the area. But it's only the public's agreement to support a party that has given a majority that got that party person elected. It's actually not through the party itself, because a party can't stand without a person. Now, if the councillor, I've said this in other videos, but I'll say it again now with this whole crossbench versus non-affiliated discussion, really, that's what it is. And all that about the fire engines, and that is to do with just the fact that, you know, when there's something going wrong, usually if it's physical, you have to do something about it, you know, rather than if it's ideological, people necessarily just carry on without giving it any attention because they can ignore the problem, right? So if you're a councillor and you stood as a member of the Labour Party, and you got elected, and even if the majority of your electorate voted Labour, of which they obviously would have done, and you're in council, if you have to have selflessness as a policy and embody that fully in your mind, body and soul, then even though the political party, you know, is not you, you're in yourself affiliate with the party, because that wouldn't be selflessness, would it? You can't say, well, the party aren't me, right? But I am affiliated with the party, which you can't do that. The only way they really can affiliate in any way with the party is by the electors choosing to vote for a party, and that the electors usually consent and agree to the majority of that party's policies, but they don't always have to. And this is the thing when it comes to things like building and planning, when, you know, they might think, you know, people who voted for Labour might generally think, we need more houses, but they might not necessarily think that the houses should be in their area or a particular area. In fact, maybe some people who are, chock-a-blocking flats, a lot of these people can't afford all these new houses they're getting built. I've just been looking on some Facebook groups where they've been complaining about how much the prices are and that no one can possibly afford them. So they're definitely not building them for people who are living on lower wages, or, they're not really providing housing realistically for anyone who actually really, all these people who they're saying have got mould, or they can't afford to keep warm, or they just rent, or whatever it is. Definitely those new houses aren't for them. I think they're for middle class people who affiliate with Labour, whose children need houses, right? Because that's when you get a house. They're not for providing better quality housing or more livable housing better condition housing for people who haven't got good condition housing or who can't afford to repair or fix it up. And that I think that's one of the things that Insulate Britain were really campaigning for. What they're actually doing is the wealthy Labour voters, right? They're actually who have got okay houses and are doing okay and got families, and then their kids go to college and they do all these college courses, and they, people like Cat Smith who believe not the real true underlying legislation, but the guidebook, the advice that's not even necessarily the truth because a lot of it's lies. They read the advice book. They do what the university and the college tutors tell them. They read they follow it's like the fire. It's like basically like follow the instructions on the aeroplane. In case of an emergency, or follow the here's your health certificate. Your 5-star food hygiene certificate, or this or that. It's all very taken for granted, superficial. Just believe what Keir Starmer says because it's in the policy or it's in the the guide. Don't actually find out what the truth is. Don't scrutinise. Don't question. Don't criticise. Don't look at the law. Don't think for yourself. Don't challenge. And that's what the New Labour are all about. Don't challenge them. Don't criticise them. Don't hold them to account. Just believe what they say. Go with the plan. Read the advice sheet. Follow the fire escape instructions. Get the council advice or even the council websites in the processes and procedures. It's not law. Everything that they write is meant to be summarising or simplifying it, and it might not necessarily be correct. And this is when they mislead and misadvise people who are quite naive and don't challenge them on it. And this is how we end up with this sperm count dropping through the floor, as well as, I'd say, IQ. I actually would be surprised if the sperm count has gone down 50%, if that's true, that Dr. Swan said on Russell Brand. If the sperm count's dropped by 50%, where is the evidence to show that if the IQ hasn't dropped by 50%, and even if they're doing any tests on IQ, they might not be, really doing true tests that show the true figures or testing people. The tests might not be good. The people who are doing the test, if the IQ's dropped by 50% like the sperm count, right, this is just hypothetical, right, then how is a person who is working out how complicated the test is going to be now compared to then going to do a proper test? Because they won't be able to do as thorough or intelligent testing. So the test results aren't going to be as good. And then they might not want people to know that they're getting stupider and turning into a chip butty. So this is the thing. Although you might say, well, we're getting all these new machines and all these new apps and all this new progress in Department of Technology. Only because it's built on existing equipment, program, software and basis that all was already invented, and they just basically learn the simple basics of it. And the majority of things like Rishi Sunak's temperature controlled coffee Bluetooth thing, it's not really cutting edge technology. All it is reshaping a container or adding technology that we already had to it, or making it a bit bigger or smaller. You might say that's innovation, coming out with a new shape or design, like innovating a chair or innovating, how a lock opens or closes, but a lot of it isn't necessarily leaps and bounds, I think a lot of it now, what I find is people who are using devices, they're just going with quite simple, options. This is like, the questionnaires on YouTube type, intelligence. We'll think of the questions and we'll pretty much give you the answers you can have. What's going on there is they're actually deciding what questions to ask and only allowing you to give certain answers. And if that is how you're going to judge intelligence, if these YouTube questionnaires are the new way that you gauge intelligence, let YouTube think of the questions they're going to ask and then, narrow down the answers to what you're allowed to have. That's not really questioning what people really think about YouTube and what its effects really are on people in deep scrutinizing psychology. What it's actually doing is reducing the intellect and shaping it to the outcomes that they want. They're actually using, these tests to shape the outcome. And this is what's happening in the political sphere as well. So, I think that I actually think now that these selflessness policies, which is a woke thing, they want control of the councillors, right? They don't really want the councillors. The political parties don't actually want the councillors to have an opinion, really, because what happens if they don't agree with the main party thing? This selflessness policy was part of a new woke agenda, which is actually really to get control of councillors as well as getting control of people. And it's actually not worked because what it's done is broken logic. And it actually, I want to take them to court. I want to take the government to court or whoever come up with this selflessness policy. But it cannot work with political party affiliation. And this is when I've got to my latest model, which I want to try and push for building and planning, which is that it only costs £800 and odd to pull a ward, right? And if your entire immediate area you live in is going to be permanently changed forever, and make you depressed or lower the spirit of the place, or even change what it is, Starmer doesn't want you to be able to defend the area at all. He wants you to be able to just choose how you're going to be attacked, right, or how it's going to be modified. But, that's taking away the right to defence. I think that the amount of money, it's all coming. It doesn't matter if you say you're helping out Labour voters. The whole thing balances on one point of Starmer that, I'm providing houses for the Labour voters, right, for people, which is basically Labour voters who are doing well and they're having kids and the kids want decent houses, right? That's what it is. Starmer is not getting people who have always been poor or have always been in, poor accommodation or low standards of living who aren't going to get out of them. He's not getting them people into those houses, and he's wanting to create new generations of Labour who aren't actually what Labour was before. And Labour before, actually, they always got everything. They got cricket clubs, they got working men's clubs with bowling greens, pool rooms, they got nightclubs, they got O2 arenas. They made and build and got all these drive-through McDonald's. The thing with the Labour Party is they got that generation actually got everything it wanted and everything that it aimed to achieve, it succeeded in. And it's a little bit like when they say, that there's no one left from the war now, that they're all gone, it was another generation. I think that Labour succeeded, it built what it aimed to build, and for those people, they liked it or it was good, but it's no good for this new generation. Now, if you put that in contrast to like conservative, affluent people, aristocracy or whatever, right? All those buildings, houses, premises are still desirable. They're still up there, even if they're not small. But you get small or large. It could be Gold Hill in Shaftesbury, or it could be, like I always use the example of Winchcombe, or somewhere in Cheltenham, Gloucester, wherever. Although there are a lot of places that are mishmash, mixed in with all different period designs now anyway. But noticed that there are a lot of places, unless you're Andrew Bridgen saying you lived in a cottage with no electricity, whatever. But there are a lot of cottages that do have electricity, or there are a lot of, put it this way, there were a lot of places from the 17th century still, and that is even before the 1800s, right? There are buildings from the 16th and 17th century that now are considered, extremely desirable properties, right? Probably even more so than these new labour houses. So it's not something, I don't think that the Department of Innovation and Technology really have got anything to add to housing, other than, you can watch Jeremy Vine on an entire wall of your house on a morning, or, have your temperature controlled coffee with Sunac, or a walk-in freezer, or whatever it is. Or the most of the things, the Bluetooth devices, are things that you can bring into the house, like a mobile smartphone, a TV, clap on, clap off light switch, all that stuff. The actual property, the buildings, although they might have new carpets and wallpaper, but, I just don't think that it is a thing of innovation and technology or progress. I think it's to do with money. It's that if you want to build something nice and build it, it can last. And if you keep it in good repair, and those people from working class and labour have never had that. I think Jeremy Corbyn, but another thing is, the thing with the Labour Party is this. So basically Labour Party, Labour are a culture. It's a culture. They've certain people. This whole thing of taking on accents when everyone's got a different accent for a region, or they've got a different accent if they're rich or poor. This whole kind of taking on of a characteristic, but becomes part of you. Also, even to do with your values. The whole existence of Labour, because it voted to be Labour, it agreed to be Labour, and it made itself. I think Keir Starmer's party now want to reject it and somehow erase it, really, and get rid of it. They don't want it to exist anymore. That's for sure. They want to exist all these new modern houses with nice new woke Labour Party voters, who've got new lives, basically. And like the people who fought the war, right? They're gone now, most of them. I think that maybe with all these, this is part of the Andrew Bridgen subject, with all these new diseases going around that they want to focus on or talk about. I get this sense that there's going to be an erasure of that. And the thing is, some of these areas, some of what those people were, is actually, there is some character and beauty in that. There is character in that. And the thing with the new woke women who are leading Labour is that they don't like certain characters. They don't like certain personalities and certain characters, like Jason Williamson. They kick them out of the party, even Jeremy Corbyn. And I think that they want to erase bad characters or characters that aren't tasteful or that they don't like. And this is all tied into the blocking and banning culture. Just push a button on your phone and you can block or ban someone or whatever, that Starmer and the Labour Party and the Tories really like. And yet they're saying, bring more people into the country, bring more foreign people in who have got different religions and different values, and we have to accept it. But at the same time, they're not wanting to accept people's individual characters and who they are, or they're wanting to change them. So, and really, a lot of the crime that's from, immigration and ethnic groups, which this is on police figures, by the way, don't take my word for it. This is what the police were saying in their figures, right? And what they're doing is they are actually wanting to change those people. They're wanting to bring them in and get them to change and conform, right? But the basis and merit of what they're being accepted in for is being different and diversity and inclusion. And what they're complaining about is that, in Ireland or even in some parts of Scotland or in Wales or even in England, you've got this, they call it, racism or sexism or racial hatred or just dislike. It could be hatred or dislike or whatever. But the SNP who are pushing all this have been voted out now anyway. And what they'll argue is that, we'll decide, yes, we do want people to change. We don't want them to be like this or that, but we'll decide what characteristics we want to keep and what characteristics we don't want. A little bit like Bill Gates with his precision breeding, his fruits now, his precision breeding fruits. And that is what you're actually wanting to change other people, but you don't want them to change you. And they think that they're right all the time and other people are wrong. And, my position is just to explain it, basically, And this is the thing with a lot of these Cat Smith type people and this new Chancellor of the Exchequer woman, Starmer. They actually are hypocrites. And Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, they're going down a list and picking out things that, they want to change and don't like about people. And then at the same time, there are people they're wanting to bring in and saying, we've got to accept all these differences. But then they're going down the list and saying, but we're not going to accept this difference or that difference. And at the end of the day, it's just like a list, And a lot of they call it antisocial behaviour because it's not conforming to what they want people to behave like. But the process, this is really what that whole crux rests on as well. The process of blocking and banning people is anti-social. The process of not humouring someone's character or jokes is anti-social. So they're actually implementing and using anti-social behaviour to control what they perceive as anti-social behaviour. And really that's like the Roman army, isn't it? Or any army. They're using guns, weapons, bombs and violence, claiming that it's going to eradicate violence. It's like the peacemaker, they call the gun the peacemaker, but it's not making any peace because it's a gun. That's basically what the social apps and platforms are doing now. You're making peace by blocking everyone out. And this is why we've found that the Public Meeting Act is being violated by YouTube, which is actually illegal. The Public Meeting Act is being violated by all the main platforms, which is illegal. So, really, that's like a military force. In the sense of, a peacemaker is a gun, but it intends to make peace. Social platforms are shunning people and Mark Zuckerberg's. It's like Mark Zuckerberg's peacemaker, basically, if you want to sum it up. It's like, Mark Zuckerberg invented the Facebook peacemaker. I'm going to make peace with everyone. I'm going to be the new bastion of society, of the world model. We're going to make peace and get people to be nice, whether they like it or not, by being antisocial and blocking them and shunning them, particularly when people aren't really experienced to wield that authority and take away their rights and block and ban, and they don't know the law properly. Many of these platforms are using policies that can't possibly be lawful. So that's where I am with it. It's just another form of peacemaking, like the peacemaker gun, but on a computer or screen. And that is really, I think, what it's all about. It's peacemaking when they're actually using non-peaceful means, really, or unfair means to try and coerce and manipulate what they want. And I think that is effectively what it comes down to with the housing as well. I think that, they're getting rid of a lot of beautiful, poor places or working class things out there because they don't actually value them. Maybe it's like a particular flavour of personality that, the Chancellor of the Exchequer wants to eradicate. They don't want that. And this is, the themes of this precision breeding for plants, which Charles is doing, that beckons that as well. Maybe these people don't like themselves. At the end of the day, it would be all right if they could have got, Gordon Brown, to actually know what he's doing with the law properly, or even Queen Elizabeth when she's, doing law. But they don't. This is in their own mistakes and errors as well. They don't really want you to, they don't care if they made a mistake and if they've done something wrong. They don't want to answer for it. They don't want to admit it. And they just want to try and get a solution and then pretend it never happened and hopefully it goes away. They don't want to be put in the Tower of London or be punished, but we've got to be blocked, banned and changed and built on and so forth. That's it with Starmer. I think that is authoritarian. It's definitely not liberal. It's definitely not coming to agreements and understandings, that's for sure. And that's really the reason why I don't like the Labour Party, because they're not the Labour Party. They don't like what they made themselves. They don't actually like what they made themselves, They don't like, the cobbled working streets, what made all the industrial things, cottages or even terrace houses. If you go to Macclesfield in some places, there's some beautiful, amazing places that aren't huge. They're not huge, they're not big, but that's who they are. And I don't think Starmer wants them to be. He doesn't want that to be who they are anymore. Keir Starmer doesn't want that to be who Labour are anymore. The Chancellor of the Exchequer wants them all to be morning television presenters with posh houses and swimming pools like Simon Cowell. I think the Chancellor of the Exchequer doesn't want beautiful houses in Macclesfield, small houses on Labour working class areas that are exceptionally, extraordinary character. She wants to erase it, like the people who fought the war, I think. They built the factories, and got the industry, and a lot of that industry might have been too much or in excess of the things they made, but that's who those people are. I definitely don't think they don't like Jeremy Corbyn. They don't. Jeremy Corbyn is not the type of person they like or want in their party, particularly leading it. So Corbyn is an example of this. I think Corbyn is an example of this Labour dislike of themselves. Which means that they're either perfectionists, and they're definitely not perfect because they've been making loads of defects in law, particularly Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. They're definitely not perfectionists. So Blair claims he's a perfectionist. He's a perfectionist in the fact that, his ideological vision of what he wants is, but not his, the truth and fact of what he's done wrong, which means he's a denier, and that's pretty much where I am with it all, really.